Look, I get that this president wants full credit for the economy he inherited and zero blame for the pandemic that he ignored. But you know what? The job doesn't work that way. Tweeting at the television doesn't fix things. Making stuff up doesn't make people's lives better. You've got to have a plan. You've got to put in the work. And along with the experience to get things done, Joe Biden has concrete plans and policies that will turn our vision of a better, fairer, stronger country into a reality. We literally left this White House a pandemic playbook that would have shown them how to respond before the virus reached our shores. They probably used it to, prop up a wobbly table somewhere. We don't know where that playbook went. 8 months into this pandemic, cases are rising again across this country. Donald Trump isn't suddenly going to protect all of us. He can't even take the basic steps to protect himself. Just last night, he complained up in Erie that the pandemic made him go back to work. I'm quoting here. He was upset that the pandemic's made him go back to work. If he'd actually been working the whole time, it never would have gotten this bad. So look, here's the truth. I want to be honest here. This pandemic would have been challenging for any president. But this idea that somehow this White House has done anything but completely screw this up is just not true. I'll give you a very specific example. Korea identified its first case at the same time that the United States did. At the same time. Their per capita death toll is just 1.3% of what ours is. In Canada, it's just 39% of what ours is. Other countries are still struggling with the pandemic, but they're not doing as bad as we are because they've got a government that's actually been paying attention. And that means lives lost, and that means an economy that doesn't work. And just yesterday, when asked if he'd do anything differently, Trump said, "Not much." Really? Not much? Nothing you can think of that could have helped some people keep their loved ones alive? So Joe's not going to screw up testing. He's not going to call scientists idiots. He's not going to host a super spreader event at the White House. Joe will get this pandemic under control with a plan to make testing free and widely available, to get a vaccine to every American cost-free, and to make sure our frontline heroes never to ask other countries for the equipment they need. His plan will guarantee paid sick leave for workers and parents affected by the pandemic, and make sure that the small businesses that hold our communities together and employ millions of Americans can reopen safely.
And that is how you rebuff every last argument that Trump and Republicans can possibly put forward with regard to Trump's handling of the coronavirus. Because underneath all of the gaslighting and distractions and spinning and whataboutisms, the truth of the matter is that this administration's response to the pandemic has not only been mismanaged, but has been one of the greatest failures in this country's history. The simple fact is that Trump had every advantage humanly possible as this virus was heading to our shores. Pandemics are nothing new in this country, and he had a pandemic playbook left by the previous administration, which had successfully emerged from two pandemics, H1N1 and Ebola. He had a pandemic response team. He had years to build up our supply of PPE, and he ignored all of it. Why? Because he was more concerned with downplaying the virus to protect the stock market. This was never about the American people, it was only about Trump's re-election. And so instead of taking the steps necessary to contain it, instead of coordinating a nationwide testing and contact tracing plan, instead of invoking the Defense Production Act and producing more PPE, instead of endorsing stay-at-home orders and nationwide mask mandates, instead of taking these steps that the countries that were successful in containing the virus took, Trump tried a different strategy. He opted to bury his head in the sand. He opted to lie. He opted to downplay the virus and pretend that it was contained and that cases were going down to zero and that it would miraculously disappear and that it would go away with the heat. And what's worse, he knew he was lying. He admitted to Bob Woodward that he knew the transmissibility of the virus. He knew the lethality of this virus. He knew that young people were in danger from this virus. But he decided to be a so-called cheerleader because apparently he didn't want to panic Americans. And now, with nearly 250,000 dead Americans, I have to wonder, are you less panicked? We don't need a cheerleader. We don't need rose-colored glasses. We don't need blinders. We needed honesty. We needed a leader with the ability to actually lead, to tell the American people what we needed to do and hear so that we would be best protected. Trump feeding the American people lies didn't save anyone's life, it cost them. In fact, Trump's failures with this virus are so extensive that even he himself, as ostensibly the safest person on the face of the earth, contracted it. And because he outright refuses to admit when he last tested negative, it's possible that he was then a vector for the virus that led to an avalanche of Republicans getting it, including Melania, Kellyanne Conway, Kayleigh McEnany, Bill Stepien, Chris Christie, Senators Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, Tom Tillis, and the list goes on and on. What this tells you is that Trump and Republicans cannot keep you safe. They can't even keep themselves safe. And worst of all, cases are now on the rise again, and still Trump has no plan. Still he's showing up without masks and holding rallies and congregating people together and calling for everything to open up, because his sole strategy is to carry out this PR campaign where everything is A-OK. And that's with an election coming up, meaning this is Trump on his best behavior. This is his pitch to voters. He is telling you in no uncertain terms that there will be zero action taken with regard to this pandemic. There's no number of deaths, no number of jobs lost, no amount of damage this nation could endure that would make him acknowledge the virus devastating this country right now. So if you're tired of the denialism, if you're tired of the mismanagement, if you're tired of the unending stream of American lives lost to a virus that our government never bothered to take seriously, then it's time for new leadership. It's time for a president who acknowledges the seriousness of this threat, who won't sacrifice people in service of his PR campaign. Joe Biden has been sounding the alarms for months. He's acknowledged the importance of testing and contact tracing and PPE. He's been clear about convening every governor in the country to mandate masks. And if that doesn't work, then going to every mayor and council member. He'll make sure every American has a vaccine for free, one that's released depending on science, not on the political calendar. All of these steps are what this country needs right now. And they're everything that Donald Trump avoided to help himself. So the choice is clear. You have Joe Biden, who will work to make sure that you're safe, or you have Donald Trump, who's been working to make his political future safe. It is not a difficult decision. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.